Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the June 25th, 2025 meeting of the Fond du Lac City Council. The first item of business is roll call, which is done electronically, and I will declare a quorum present with us all here. The next item on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance, which is followed by a moment of silent reflection. Please rise. Next on our agenda is public hearings, and we have none, so we will move on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda finalizes the proposed actions for the meeting. A, June 11th, 2025 minutes, and B, list of claims dated June 18th, 2025. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve. I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Godfrey, second by Mr. Heisler. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, please proceed to vote. And that passes unanimously. Next on our agenda is audience comments, agenda and non-agenda items. The presiding officer will limit speaking time for non-agenda items to 1 minute and items noticed on the agenda to 5 minutes. Ms. Hefter, do we have anyone wishing to speak? We do not, so that concludes audience comments. We'll move on to our action items. First is A, City Clerk dated June 18th, 2025, annual alcohol beverage license renewals, and our introduction is by our City Clerk, Ms. Hefter.
Thank you, President Brault. The list presented to you includes license applications that filed their renewal after May 16th, the first due date. Renewal applications were published in the Reporter on June 8th, 9th, and 10th for the purpose of notifying the public of pending action and to invite comment. All licenses have been inspected by Fire and City Inspection Department. No license will be granted to any license holder for which any money is delinquent and unpaid to the city. City staff recommends approval of the renewal list presented to you, and one final renewal license will be presented to you at the July 9th meeting that did not file timely. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Hefter? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Heisler and second by Mr. Mullen. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, please proceed to vote. And that passes unanimously. Item B is resolution number 9186, a resolution waiving the prohibition against possession of alcoholic beverages on public ways for Fat Joe's live music at Fondue Fest. Again, our introduction is by our City Clerk, Ms. Hefter.
Thank you again. Fat Joe's is requesting the city to waive the possession of alcoholic beverages on public streets for Fondue Fest on September 6, 2025, on a portion of Division Street between Main Street and Macy Street from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. No glass containers or carry-ins are permitted in the designated area. Applicant must post signs, no alcohol behind the special event area, and must have staff monitoring for compliance. City staff has approved the special event application and recommends approval.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Hefter? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion. Motion by Mr. Schussler, second by Ms. Leering. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, please proceed to vote. And that passes unanimously. Item C is resolution number 9187, a resolution making an appointment to the City Plan Commission with our introduction by our City Manager, Mr. Moore.
Thanks. Good evening, everyone. I'm nominating Mr. Brent Schumacher to Plan Commission. He served on Plan Commission before. He owns his own construction company. He's very well versed in all the tasks that come before the Plan Commission, so I recommend approval.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Moore? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
All right, motion by Mr. Heisler, second by Ms. Leering. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, please proceed to vote. And that passes unanimously. Item D is resolution number 9188, a resolution appointing a temporary municipal judge for the Lakeside Municipal Court to fill a temporary term until an election is held on November 4th, 2025, with our introduction by our City Attorney, Ms. Hoffman.
Thank you. This is coming from our Honorable Judge Jerry J. Jerome J. Shouldn't call him Jerry. Anyway, is retiring, and he needs to. We don't have someone. He doesn't have a successor already. We have to have one appointed. And we're one of 22 municipalities that are part of Lakeside Municipal Court, and the executive committee of the Lakeside Municipal Court solicited and found a temporary replacement for Judge Jay, and has asked that we pass a resolution authorizing him to be our temporary judge, and also asking us to pass, the next resolution that's on the agenda will be to have a special election to fill the municipal court judge position. The person that is being named as the temporary one may choose to run in November, but is not required to. It will be open to anybody who files papers. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but I'd ask you to pass both resolutions.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Hoffman on this resolution? Mr. Heisler.
Thank you, Ms. Hoffman. Can you tell us who's filling the vacancy?
Oh, Troy Damstig.
Okay,
I apologize, I don't know if I'm saying his name absolutely correctly. He's a very recently retired captain from the Ripon Police Department.
got it. Yep, okay. And that, by the way, is the first time I've ever heard Jerry called Jerome. So in all the years I've been in radio with him, that's the first time. So thanks to Jerry for a wonderful career and all of his service. Thank you, Ms. Hoffman.
All right, thank you. Are there any other questions for Ms. Hoffman? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion. Motion by Mr. Godfrey and second by Mr. Heisler. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, please proceed to vote. And that passes unanimously. Item E is a resolution number 9189, a resolution ordering a special election for municipal judge of the Lakeside Municipal Court to be held on November 4th, 2025. And again, our introduction is by our city attorney, Ms. Hoffman. Nothing to add? Okay, right. All right, are there any additional questions on this resolution for Ms. Hoffman? I guess I just do want to have one question. So would November 4th be when typically we would have, like, I didn't actually look at the calendar, is that the first Tuesday of November?
Correct.
But there's no other items that are going to be on a ballot, because typically we would not have a fall election.
Correct.
And there's nothing we can do to postpone to spring.
It was, I know that there was requests for additional extensions, and the head judge for our district was not willing to do that.
Okay. All right, seeing no other questions, I will entertain a motion. Motion by Mr. Schisler and second by Mr. Godfrey. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, please proceed to vote. And that passes unanimously. Item F is resolution number 9190, a resolution approving the final plat of the Eastern Ridge Estates Phase 2 subdivision, with our introduction by our Community Development Director, Ms. Benson.
Thank you, Ms. Brault. So development occurs in a lot of different ways, and one of those ways is on the residential side, the division of land. And if you divide the land beyond, I believe it's 7 times as governed by the state statute, you have to do a plat. And that plat process is also governed by state statute. Starts off with a preliminary plat, which is reviewed by planning and engineering to make sure that it complies with all the zoning and other requirements. Then you move into the final plat process, and that's when it's actually recorded and actually those lots are then created. This particular plat is Eastern Ridge, which is a continuation of the first part of Eastern Ridge. So if you're visiting our beautiful new expanded Aurora facility on Wisconsin American Drive, and you continue to go eastward on Lynn Avenue, you'll then enter into the new Eastern Ridge Estates. So this part of the plat will now connect what has previously been Phase 1 of Eastern Ridge, now all the way to Highway K. And so both the Plan Commission and staff recommend approval with the technical conditions that have been listed in the resolution.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Benson? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion. Motion by Mr. Mullins, second by Mr. Zimmerman. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, please proceed to vote. Oh, hold on one second. Okay. It was Mr. Mullen made the motion and then Mr. Zimmerman second. Do you want individual or just all in favor? Okay. Yes.
Yes.
All right, that passes unanimously. That ends our action items, so we will move on to the presentation of input items. First, we have donations and Fond du Lac County Historical Society investment updates presented by City Manager Mr. Moore and Lisa Pauley Lefebvre.
Thank you. What we're going to do tonight is two things. Maggie's going to bring up a slide for me because I want to review for you the donations that you've approved over the last many months and the status thereof. So many of you were at the Fairgrounds stage ribbon cutting yesterday, coincidentally, and that, I think, you probably arrived there impressed and left there impressed. That facility, I think, was a very good investment, and proud to be part of that. You also authorized $25,000 for the Fond du Lac County Historical Society, and that's why Lisa's here tonight, because at the time that you authorized this, I think it's fair to say there was some question whether or not the Historical Society was going to get through. And the money that was authorized by the City Council, I think Lisa would agree, helped them get through and to find a plan for the future. So another good investment, but she knows so much more about it than I could ever explain. We asked her to come here tonight and give you an update on how that money was spent. Last year, you approved $75,000 for Veterans Park, and as I understand it, that's going to start in a couple of months as the county project, and then our wraparound project with lighting will start this year. We'll do half of it. I don't know if you know, but the Main Street project that we are getting ready to do on the south part of our project site on Main Street, meaning from 1st South down to 6th, includes Court Street. Court Street is that little street that connects Main and Macy. And so while we're doing that, we're going to put in all new lighting so that that'll complement what's going to happen inside the park. And we will then finish that next year because next year we're going to redo part of Western, just on the south side of the park. So it makes sense next year to carve up all that pavement so we can do the electrical. And we'll also have lighting on Macy, so that'll be really nice. And then lastly, I was speaking with the CEO of the Boys and Girls Club, and they had really good news. Boys and Girls Club and YMCA have passed through a threshold that gives them confidence that they can announce the beginning of that project sometime soon. So they feel really good about what they've done, and they express their appreciation again for the contribution that the City of Fond du Lac made. Before I turn it over to Lisa, I did want to mention, you may remember that you also allocated $100,000 for the work and research that went into this. And at the time, you decided that it would be a good idea to, instead of allocating 125 for this effort, we would do 100 for this and 25 for the Historical Society. So now you've got a completed book, thanks to Daphne and her partner, and we've got the Historical Society still in business. So thank you for that. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lisa.
All right.
Thanks, Lisa.
Good evening. My name is Lisa Pauley Lefebvre. I serve as president of the Fond du Lac County Historical Society. And I hope I will answer any questions you have on your mind regarding the grant funds and the direction of the society in my presentation. We are an independent nonprofit organization. We are funded by donors, members, admissions, rentals, sponsorships, and grants. We are an affiliate of the Wisconsin Historical Society and do seek their advice and experience, but they do not override the decisions of the Fond du Lac County Historical Society Board of Directors because we are independent. I do want to thank the council for approving that $25,000 match for an anonymous donor grant. This grant had to be matched by a municipality, dollar for us to be able to receive it. So the total funds were $50,000, 25 from the city and 25 from the anonymous donor. Our name might confuse some people that we are a governmental agency, but we are not. Our mission statement is connecting people to history by inspiring passion, preservation, and exploration. The connection is to Fond du Lac County history, and also, as the City of Fond du Lac Historical Society is the largest city in the county. This matching grant gave us the ability to hire a 6-month transition director with the proper degree and experience, along with paid internships, with those attaining their history degree or going on to a higher degree in history. So we didn't just hire somebody off of the street. These were vetted. Our transition director worked with the paid interns and set us on a path to be able to downsize the village with our area's history as a priority. The matching grant also helped pay for utilities needed for temperature control for artifact and records preservation. And artifact temperatures and people temperatures aren't the same. So we dress for the artifacts, not for our comfort. Although the funds for the transition director and utilities have been spent, we do have some funds left to purchase more collections care storage and time for some more interns to work through the summer. Through this process, we have found several items that have no connection. Over the decades, items were dropped off and at that time taken into our collection, expanding our collection far beyond the mission. But now, through our transition director and interns, we have searchable documentation on over 15,000 artifacts alone. As we comb through the collection in the various buildings, we will keep representative samples from each building in the village and other significant Fond du Lac County history now that we can connect the artifact to a donor and a story about our history. The plan outlined downsizes the village, keeping the Galloway House, Carriage House, gazebo, log cabin, welcome center, pavilion, and the Blakely Museum with the library. We are collaborating with the Fond du Lac Public Library to fill in any gaps that we can for city directories, as they have some, we have some. Why should we both have some? And to also give them the appropriate genealogy books from city and township families to build their collection, which they have. This way, that's kept open to the public. There's no reason why we should have that by appointment only. We want to collaborate, not duplicate. We've also had the Wisconsin Historical Society Repository in Oshkosh receive public tax records. Not something we have to keep their tax records, and that's something that people will automatically go to the repository for the kind of things that they looked that up for. This makes all of that available to the public without the appointment. However, now I'll talk about the appointment. The photos, the sensitive media, historic records will be kept in the temperature-controlled Blakely Museum Library. Other records will be stored at the Fond du Lac County campus in a separate locked room, all available by appointment through the Fond du Lac County Historical Society. So that will be locked and it's under our jurisdiction. As we find homes for the artifacts, such as the Rosendale fire pumper was rehomed in Rosendale, and the Knowles fire truck was rehomed at the Knowles Fire Department. We have a process where other museums or historical societies, the local first, then they go outward, educational entities, other appropriate nonprofit organizations before they get to any sale. That's always a question, and it's like, no, we have to follow the process and procedures outlined. Buildings have to be empty before they go anywhere, and there's a requirement of having a fully insured professional building mover. You can't bring a pickup truck and start trying to move a building. There's a process for that also. As we transform the society from having several buildings to a focus on proper maintenance of fewer buildings, while having more educational programming and rotating exhibits, that's one of the problems we've had. Normally, a museum has 10% of its collection on display and 90% in storage to rotate. We were just the opposite. 90% was out, 10% was stored, so nothing really rotated, and this time we will be able to do that and make things interesting. We do have a full calendar of programming for the summer listed on our website, fdlhistory.org. And this Sunday at 3 p.m. will be our second annual Mother-Daughter Tea, and August 10th will be the 69th annual Ice Cream Social. And I want to thank the Fond du Lac City Council and the city staff for being supportive while we go through this very difficult but necessary procedure to continue our mission to represent history for many years to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Do we have any questions from council members? Mr. Schussler.
Congratulations for keeping it rolling. I was wondering about the carriage house. Do some board members at least feel that's a burden to sustain that big old place?
At this point, it's on the National Register with the Galloway House and the gazebo. So that is something we've been in discussions with the Historical Society. They have advice and experience. So we'll keep talking to them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from council? I'm not seeing any, and I just, again, want to say thank you so much for coming to present to us. I'm glad we could help create a partnership with the city and the Historical Society, because this is something that is very meaningful to our residents, and we're so glad that it can continue, maybe in a slightly different form than people are used to, but I think it sounds like some really great improvements are being made, so thank you. All right, seeing no other questions on that, we will, oh, sorry, Mr. Schussler, yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
When's the next time the Galloway House likely will need to be painted?
It'll be probably, 7 more years, or 7 to 8 more years.
And that's a big deal.
It is a big deal. It should be painted about every 10 years. It had been scraped completely down, repairs have been made, and it was completely painted. So
I think the communities will step up to help with that.
I believe so.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes. All right, did anybody else come up with any other questions? Seeing none. All right. Oh, Mr. Moore?
I just wanted to publicly acknowledge Lisa. I think without her, it's fair to say, it'd be much more difficult for the survival of the campus and the Historical Society. But just to take a minute, because besides a full-time job, she's on that campus for as many hours. It's like a full-time job for her. And, oftentimes that gets overlooked, but I just wanted to point that out, Lisa. Thank you for all you've done through thick and thin.
Wonderful, thank you. All right, seeing no other questions, we will move on to our next item. Item B is our 2026 budget overview, presented by City Manager Mr. Moore and Director of Administration Ms. Davy.
Yes. Ms. Brault, you just presented the first slide. That was great, thank you. Maggie, we can go to the next slide. On the second meeting in June every year, we give the council a forecast, because between roughly February and now of every year, we've done a lot of analyzing, we've done a lot of problem solving, and we've done a lot of coordinating. And much of that coordination happens between Tricia Davy and the department heads. We look at what's going on around us in terms of the financial environment, the economic environment, and it boils down to this oftentimes is, is how much flexibility will we have going into the next year based on our forecast for net new construction. And so that's where I start tonight. We're forecasting about 1%. We did the same last year, and it came in at over 1.6. It might not sound like much, but it matters. And so as we build this budget, we're looking at 1% to be, as they say, on the safe side. So that's where we are right now. Next, please. I'm going to show this in two different ways. I think it's always good to take a minute and think about the big picture. Where does all the money go? Because that's where the priorities are, or should be. So those two big blue boxes represent $40 million. John Mark's out there on the left, hoping and praying that the city council will authorize some for him in addition to that. But we, I think, have been committed for a long time to maintaining a very small footprint in our support team. And you see there the general government team. That's about $3 million of the 40. And then the rest of it is sort of the front lines. And you can see there in parentheses the number of full-time employees plus part-time. One thing I would point out that under Mr. DeVries, not all of those 124 are supported by property taxes. As a matter of fact, many of those aren't. The folks who operate the trash trucks aren't, wastewater isn't, water isn't, and the transit isn't, except for a small allocation that we provide through the tax levy. So you can see what we anticipate to go into next year with the 327 permanent positions, 269 of which are in our general operating budget. Again, the difference there is what's supported by fees rather than property taxes. As I look at this, I wanted to point out that as we close this presentation in a few minutes, I'm going to talk about the wage study. But you see here, we've got 153 positions that are in unions. And right now, we're in conversations and negotiation with both police and fire unions. So we have to make some estimates and assumptions about how those are going to turn out so we can build the budget. And we've done that. Next, please. This is an extract from the current budget book, but it's just showing you, again, what I explained on the previous slide, sort of how the property taxes are prioritized, how that $40 million for 2025 was broken down. And it won't be that much more than that in 2026. Next, please. After this, I'm going to hand it over to Tricia, but I think it's always important to think about, what our priorities are. I always write about these in the budget memo because it ought to be guiding our spending, particularly in the capital improvement plan. I did want to mention a little bit about each one of those bullets. Last year, you authorized a pretty significant amount of money to support residential development in a way that we hadn't done that before, which is partnering with private developers without TIF, without any sort of programmatic workarounds. It's just literally us partnering. And right now, if you drive out by Holy Family Church and you look north, you'll see a massive amount of earth being moved. So that housing development is up and running. And then earlier, Diane was talking about the plat there by Highway K. That work will begin soon too. That will create a connecting street between what's there now and Highway K. So those investments are all obviously paying off. And I think that we're going to propose continued investments in housing, similar to those for Tricia and for me, and for Diane too, as a way to have, an amount we can anticipate year in and year out. We're going to put in the CIP sort of a fixed amount over each year of the next 5 years. Doesn't mean we have to execute, but it's there to anticipate the borrowing that would go along with that. On the next one, support comes in a lot of different ways. We didn't necessarily help Sam Meyer move his building from where it was to where it is, but we committed to redoing the entire street after it was done. Not because it damaged it, but because that street was beat up, and we knew that the improvement he was going to make would be really blessed if we made an improvement. We didn't invest any money in the Fond du Lac Beer Company, but they know that we're investing in Main Street and other businesses on Main Street in the downtown, which prompted that significant investment. And so how all that ties together, I could go on, but I just wanted to point some of those things. When it comes to recreation assets, I think if you were in the park, Lakeside Park last Sunday, you would agree, people think a lot of that park. It was packed. There were events all over the place in that park. We're in discussions right now about how to build a permanent shelter. You approved that in the CIP for this year, but a permanent shelter for the carousel. That's why it's not up right now. We've got some preliminary designs that have come in that we're looking at, but that's an investment so that we can keep that. It's kind of a historical thing, and to protect that from the weather. But we've also, as you've seen, made a lot of other investments in all the parks. I think they're in great shape. You've attended many of those ribbon cuttings where we have new playground equipment everywhere, and we're going to continue to work on that. But you're going to see some of that in the 2026 budget as well. When it comes to people think about infrastructure in so many different ways, it's taken us about 5 years to get from Johnson Street on Main down to Pioneer. Of course, we put off the hardest one till the last, and that's what we're doing right now. But that's a commitment to, and that doesn't mean if you drive on Elm Street, you'd wonder if we've ever noticed that before. It's rough. We're just not there yet. So that's something I tell people. We know that we're getting there $1 at a time. And then lastly, this goes to all the department heads and how they operate, all the departments and how all of our employees operate, which is, reflected in the various accreditations, the various awards and things like that. And, kudos to them, but also, it comes from you providing them financial resources to do what it is they need to do. So with that, I'll say that the picture there on the right represents about $13 million. It is the project that you approved about 3 years ago to rebuild the pump station between Lincoln and the river. And it has been every bit as complicated as we thought it would be, but it's all past that, and it's headed on its home stretch. So that's been a big investment worth making. So, Tricia?
All right. Next slide, please. So a lot of what I'll be speaking to you about tonight will be very similar to what you heard last year, which is a good thing, because then it means there's no surprises coming in the 2026 budget, and we'll be delivering a balanced budget to you in August. So the main components that drive our budget process are still the same. We'll talk about our revenues, both the tax levy and all of the other revenues we receive. We'll talk about the largest cost driver for our budget, which is our people and their wages and benefits. And then last, we'll talk a little bit about fund balance and how much we need to apply to actually balance the budget. Next slide. So first up are the revenues. The top section of this slide focuses on our tax levy. As Joe mentioned, our net new construction on a few slides ago. So we know that our tax levy can only increase by that amount, or approximately 1%. In dollars, that means per the state's formula that our tax levy can only increase about $270,000. So the pie chart on the left side of the screen shows just how small a sliver the $270,000 increase is when compared to the overall budget. It's not very much. On the bottom half of the slide, the pie chart on the lower right represents all of the revenue sources that we use to fund our budget, which includes the tax levy. So once again, the biggest piece of the pie represented in blue, our tax levy and our state aids. accounts for about 77% of our revenues. And outside of the impact that we can make to net new construction and the effect that that has on our levy, there's really no other influence that we have on any of the revenues that are in that blue section. The orange other section is also one that we have little control over, as that primarily includes things like our interest income on our investments, and we have, just like everybody at home, we have no control over the interest rates that are set by the banks. So just like last year, between the blue and orange sections, we've identified that we have little to no control over about 87% of the revenues that we receive to operate with every year. And also, just like last year, this leaves us with that little green section, or our fee-based revenues. Those we do have some control over, but as we've talked about before, increasing fines, license fees, or permit fees is really a balancing act. If we raise our fee too high on building permits, it will discourage contractors from developing in the city, which then would affect we would receive less revenue, and it would also affect our net new construction. And that would not be a good thing for either of those two little green slices on either of those pie charts, because they would get that much smaller. On to the next slide, please. So next up are expenditures. With natural cost increases on everything from things like wages and benefits, utilities and supplies, all being much higher than our 1% net new construction allowance, the focus of the budget again becomes affordability. And you'll hear that from the departments as their theme this year too, over the summer when they make their presentations to you. Given that all of the services we provide are largely dependent on people, personal services will always be our single largest operating expense. I just want to briefly focus on the two yellow bullet points, the sub-bullet points there. Regarding the wage study for our non-represented employees, I'm not going to go into any details tonight. The consultant will actually be here at the council meeting on July 23rd to go over things in a lot more detail. The good news, though, is that the initial recommendations indicate that our current plan was not out of line with the market, and that implementing the recommendations from that study will be affordable given our current expenditure constraints. The changes that we made to the health insurance plan in 2025 are showing some positive impacts. We did list all of those in the 2025 budget book memo if you'd like to go back and review them. But the two largest changes that we made were the Garner program, which was an addition that drives employees to best performing doctors by offering deductible reimbursement incentives, and that's been very well received. The Garner company is very surprised with the amount of participation that we've had compared to what they normally see from their book of business. And then the ATI physical therapy program, employees can access physical therapy without a doctor referral, which results in faster improvement times for them and reduces unnecessary doctor visits. I do want to take just a few minutes to talk about the expenditure restraint program, or the ERP program as we call it, as this adds another layer of affordability constraints into our budget process. So on the revenue side, we have levy limit constraints based upon net new construction. On the expenditure side is the state's expenditure restraint program. What that program does is incentivizes a municipality from growing their expenses beyond a certain formulaic dollar figure. The incentive comes in the form of additional state aids, which for us are significant at about $1 million every year. The components of the formula take a percentage of our net new construction plus a rolling average of the consumer price index to arrive at the math that results in a cap on how much our expenditures can increase in order to qualify for that program. Unlike levy limits, though, we do have the ability not to participate in the ERP program, but that's a very tough decision to make, knowing that we'd be giving up about $1 million in state aids and essentially creating a $1 million revenue hole in our budget by giving those up. Related to fund balance, since fund balance is similar to your savings account, once you spend it, it's gone, we take our usual conservative approach to using it within the budget, and using an amount that's roughly equivalent to less than 0.5% of our total $40 million budget is what we'll be applying to balance the budget for 2026. Next slide. So moving on to the capital improvement plan. This slide is exactly the same as last year, except for the last bullet about the excess TIF increment, which I'll get to in a minute. The great thing about a 5-year capital improvement plan is that there isn't much that changes from year to year, as any large project takes a lot of time to plan and implement, so we're well on our way with having that 5-year plan, and proper planning is always the key. During the department presentations over the summer, you'll hear more about specific projects in each of the different areas listed on the slide. The bullet about TIF increment stems from a question from Mr. Schuessler about the $1.7 million in excess TIF increment that the city recently received from closing some TIDs. The TID in question is the South Industrial Park, which we closed in 2024. So excess increment is generated during the life of the TID. The yearly increment that we receive doesn't always exactly match dollar for dollar with the total expenses of the TID. So when the TID is closed, there could be more increment generated than expenses, and that's what they call the excess. The requirements for TIDs call it for us to take any excess and distribute it back to all of the taxing jurisdictions, the county, the school district, Moraine Park, and then the city. So for the city portion, I've put that into the capital improvement fund, and we'll use it to offset future tax levy or borrowing support of various capital projects over the next couple of years. Because in my mind, less debt is always a good thing, so if I have another revenue source to fund some of those projects, that's my preference. Next slide. This is our usual, our normal budget schedule. You'll see in the green box the upcoming presentations by the various departments over the summer. And then on the July 23rd date, you'll also see the wage study presentation by our consultant. And then we have the rest of the schedule all the way through mailing the tax bills by the third Monday in December. Next slide. And I will turn it back over to Mr. Moore.
Thank you, Tricia. So the good news is the big problems are solved. It's going to be a balanced budget, there's no doubt about that. I've highlighted that we'll be able to provide the current level of services, but as Tricia alluded to without saying it point blank, there's really no flexibility. That's not a bad thing. We're going to be able to execute everything we need to execute. We're going to be able to provide you the choices to make substantial investments via the CIP. So that's all good. But the overriding theme that you hear throughout the state is some municipalities can't get it done. We do get it done, but there's not any flexibility at the end of the day once we've worked through those things. And basically met the needs of the departments, because that's what it all comes down to. Tricia talked about fund balance, super important, because prior to the state legislature's fix to shared revenue, we, like so many municipalities, were running dangerously low of fund balance and starting to bump up against our policy limit. We're totally recovered and then some. So we're in a really strong position right now. The auditors confirmed that as well. I said earlier that I would talk just a minute about the wage study. So Tricia had mentioned that the consultant's going to come before you and talk with you about her findings in a level of detail that would allow you to ask all the questions you ever wanted. So I'm just going to summarize it. Tricia said it was affordable. It is. A couple of findings. 84% of our positions were within 3% of the market. That was a great news story. What that means is that the annual reviews that the department heads were doing and then HR was supporting by getting those reviewed by a third party, that was working almost all the time. So the department heads were doing a great job of identifying positions they thought were out of sync with the market. That's the takeaway. So 84% were within 3%. We understand what the market is for that other 16% and how to make those adjustments. So just like we talked about with the revaluation, when the dust settles on the wage study, we'll be reconciled with the market across the board for all the 157 positions that we looked at. Another thing we learned is that as we went into this, and we talked about this at a city council meeting, we weren't sure how this was going to shake out. We weren't sure if we were close on some, close on a lot, and how close or how far away. So we were pleased at the outcome, but one lesson learned is we're going to do it more often. So just like we do a revaluation every 5 years max, we're going to look at, and we're going to put this in the report to you when it's finalized, probably an anticipated look at every 4 to 5 years at this level of detail across the board. Makes more sense because it creates predictability and it reduces the likelihood that your diverging from the market too far. So that's going to be a recommendation we're going to make, and then, of course, we'll budget for that. Moving on to the last, we have incorporated every request from the departments into our 2026 CIP. And what we tried to do for the out years is keep everything on the same schedule we showed you last year and move it up a year. So there aren't any surprises in the CIP based on what you have already seen. So with that, I'll be willing to take any questions. You know, with this presentation, we always try to minimize the amount of numbers that we're flinging out there because, as I started with, a number of these are based on assumptions. The state will tell us what our shared revenue is going to be, what our net new construction is going to be, et cetera. And all those help us firm things up. So, you know, that's where we are today. I feel good about it. I think we're going to be in good shape. But any questions, be glad to take them.
All right, thank you, Mr. Moore, and thank you, Ms. Davy. We'll start our questions with Mr. Schisler.
Thank you. What is the date that they look at net new construction? Come up with the percentage?
Through essentially last year,
Last year?
for the year of 2024. So what'll happen is the Department of Revenue looks at every municipality, and it's all based on information that we've provided to the Department of Revenue, and then they will publish that in a summary report for 1,850 municipalities.
I know with assessed value, they look at January 1.
Yeah, that's right. Same. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Mr. Heisler.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation, Mr. Moore. Thank you, Ms. Davy. I'm just curious, I know you had some placeholder numbers in there for, you know, the ongoing negotiations with police and fire and things like that. How do you decide a placeholder number? Is that based on previous years, or how do you go about that?
It depends. What we did this year is we looked at what we thought the tax levy was going to be for next year that we were going to propose to you. We looked at what we knew we had to spend on personnel. That means salary and benefits. The difference between the two, we essentially applied a per capita division to that number. And we allocated per capita basis to the police department, fire department, and to general employees. And so as we've thought about the wage study, that number has guided our thinking about what's affordable.
Thank you. Excellent explanation.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any questions from other council members, so I'm going to throw a few at you if you don't mind.
Yes.
I guess the first one, I would just like you to explain how, if at all, did the revaluation impact the 2026 budget?
Well, you may have noticed I didn't mention it because it doesn't. But that's not a very well understood relationship. But I think as we talk about this and as we publish the draft budget in August, we're really going to explain that because I think repetition's helpful. But I've said this a number of times to you and on the radio and in other forums that you set the tax levy. What the assessment is, that's separate. That determines the tax rate, but it's got nothing to do with the tax levy that you approve. And so as we think about this, we don't think about the assessed values of properties.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the repetition because I do think that's going to be really helpful because I think that's going to be top of people's minds is, you know, if my property was suddenly reassessed at such a higher amount, they're going to be really worried that that impacts the budget. But I think you also laid out very clearly here that we don't really have a mechanism to raise taxes because if our net new construction is only 1%, that's all we get.
Right, and I think the thing you can really lean on is that's statutory. That's not a city policy. That's the way it is. I noticed that, well, let me back up. The assessors spoke with a little over 700 people after the notices of assessment went out via visits, phone calls, and email. So spoke's not the right word. They communicated with over 700 people. And particularly for the people who came in or called, when the conversation got to taxes, the assessors said, we don't do taxes. But here's how it works. So they were talking about the mechanics, not the specifics. A lot of people wanted a forecast, and that's hard to do, so the assessors sent them to me for that. But when the assessors were talking about the mechanics of it and kind of what we were just talking about, it helped 95% of the people say, okay, I got it. Just because I went from $200,000 to $300,000 on my assessed value doesn't mean my taxes are going up $100,000. I mean, you know, because of the shock effect of that, some people hadn't really processed that. So just talking about the mechanics of it, about how the levy's set here, the tax rate's what's derived as a result of the assessment. And we shared, you remember that concept, the revenue neutral rate that I showed you? It's like, what if you took the new assessment and applied this year's tax levy so that you could see what happens to the rate we put in the tax bills and the rate it would have been had we applied the new assessment? That helped people a lot too, especially by email, because they could get that number. One thing that I remember from when we did this last time in 2019, it came up again this time. It's a reminder how many people have their houses paid off, because they're personally responsible for budgeting that and planning for that. And so that's a source of concern for people. Ms. Broad, I'm giving you the longest of long answers because all these things matter. So when people are really concerned, it's especially from people who own their house outright, because they're really trying to think about budgeting and how much they need to budget for their property taxes. Not limited to that group, but it's especially sharp with that group.
Yeah, and I appreciate the detail.
Sure.
So another question I had is, since Ms. Davy brought up the expenditure restraint program, I just kind of want to throw a hypothetical out at you, because one of the things that I know I hear a lot from people is, why can't the city have X program or add things or whatever? So my hypothetical is say that we really wanted a program that could be funded through fees like we do for like garbage pickup. Does that impact the expenditure restraint program if we're adding a program that isn't funded by tax levy but is through fees?
You or me? Sorry.
When you answer, answer with the caveats that maybe is the answer.
Yeah, maybe is the answer. There are some things that the state has said that if you enact a fee now, you can't, you have to make some adjustments to your tax levy. That was probably, 4 or 5 years ago when they did that. Other things, it depends on the fee, and it depends accounting-wise how we'd want to handle it. The very high-level answer is yes, it would affect that expenditure restraint formula, because that formula doesn't really care about your revenue source. It only cares about the fact that you're going to spend money.
Okay. And I appreciate that it's a complicated thing. And, that just kind of popped into my head as you were kind of explaining that. So, something to think about too. And that's something that, like I said, people often are like, why can't the city do X, Y, Z? But as you said, it's a very difficult decision to accept that expenditures restraint funding that we can get means we are very restricted then. So, I guess the one other question that I had was, there's a lot of talk about the state budget process and it possibly going past the June 30th deadline that they're supposed to pass a budget. And just wondering, does the state budget process impact the city and our budgeting?
Only if it is delayed substantially, and I don't think it will be. But it could. I mean, because I just said if it's delayed substantially, that means there's not been an agreement between the legislature and the government, or the governor, about the budget that would drive, for example, shared revenue. That stays at what it is now as opposed to what it's going to be. there's a whole host of appropriations and authorizations in the budget that affect us. But I don't anticipate that's going to be a problem this year. It might be late, but I don't think it's going to be that late.
Okay, good to know. That was all the questions that I had, and I'm not seeing any other questions from council. So, and again, I always like to remind that the door's always open, and this is just the first of many discussions about the 2026 budget.
Yes.
So thank you so much, Mr. Moore and Ms. Davy, for the presentation. And with that, I will entertain, or, yes, with that, there are no more input items, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Second.
Motion by Mr. Zimmerman, second by Mr. Heisler. This is not debatable. Please proceed to vote. All right, that passes unanimously. We are adjourned.
That was a weak gavel, bro.